APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Concili Incorporated is Nevada's premier Democratic campaign firm, fighting for progressive issues and candidates for over a decade, and proud sponsor of Battleborn Progress.
This episode of Out in Front brought to you by
Concili Inc., Nevada State Education Association, One APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt, as well as our episode sponsors, Save Lives Nevada and Washoe Education Association.
There watching Out in Front Thursday nights at 5. I am not Annette Magnus. I am Will Pregman. I'm subbing in for Annette tonight because she's feeling a little bit under the weather, but I'm here to host this wonderful program with a panel of guests who are here to talk about National Voter Registration Day. It's a lesser known holiday you may not have heard of, but it's happening next week on Tuesday. And many of our Nevada friends are doing a lot of creative and awesome things to celebrate and to make sure that you are updated with your voter registration to your current address and your current name. So we have a very diverse panel tonight. We're going to be talking about various aspects of voter registration in Nevada, how it impacts various different communities, and what efforts are going on in state that you at home, the viewer, can get involved in. And a lot of it, some you can even do right from your couch at home. So I first want to invite of our 4 guests tonight, Angelina Saldana with Silver State Voices. Angelina, you're the voter registration coordinator at Silver State Voices. Can you talk to us about what your role is and how that relates to National Voter Registration Day?
Hi, Will. Thank you, first and foremost, for having me on today. Very excited to be talking about the amazing work our partners do and what SSV does. So for myself, I basically work to coordinate a couple of organizations in our state with their voter registration efforts. We cover more ground this way. We coordinate our efforts together, and we're able to really move boundaries and do what we have to meet our communities where they're at, which is the biggest challenge and the challenge we take up with honor. As far as how that connects to National Voter Registration Day, well, National Voter Registration Day is basically, for us folks in the civic engagement world, it's our Super Bowl. It's the event of the year that we're looking forward to. It's the day where we're getting thousands of people registered on this day. States participate, organizations all over our country participate. It's massive for us, and it's kind of the day I look forward to all year as our voter registration coordinator here at Silver State Voices.
Yeah, I imagine this really is kind of like Christmas, the Super Bowl, New Year's all on the same day. Can you talk a little bit about what plans you've had overall for National Voter Registration Day? I know that we here at BBP and IPN are going to be lifting up events that are happening all across the state, but can you talk about the importance of really celebrating National Voter Registration Day and why it should be a celebration that we're all registering and getting out to vote?
Yeah, well, I know a lot of the partners that are holding events that are on the call today. I'll leave all the juicy details to them. But I mean, we're going to have DJs, we're going to have lots of free food, we're going to be meeting our communities where they're at. And this is really, really important because our communities are the communities that have the hardest time accessing the right to vote historically and to this day. And we know that for many reasons, whether it be, just a lot of historical context to it, or really big boundaries that are still facing our communities to this day. Our partners know this. And we also know that there's a big reason why there are a lot of big reasons why we have to celebrate our right to vote and really fight for our access and work hard with our communities to make sure that they're actually prepared to vote. There are so many boundaries that happen day in, day out, whether it's constant moving, issues with just feeling confident enough to fill out a form, questioning whether you have the resources you need to even fill out a form in the first place. So I think the work that our partners are doing, the partners on this call today, they understand what it means to go through all that with our communities. They're from our communities, and they know how to meet them where they're at. And we're going to have a really good time celebrating the rights that we've built, the rights that we constantly fight for day in and day out. And we're very excited. As far as SSV, we worked really hard to make sure that our partners have the resources they needed, the outreach. We've also made an interactive map of all the events happening throughout the state. We really are so proud of this because really, I had a conversation with multiple folks about the vibe in our communities, the tension that's kind of there with voting. And it doesn't have to be that way. We're really here to make sure our voices are heard because I trust our communities to say what they need. That's exactly what we're doing here. And that's why we wanted to really throw a big old party throughout the state, have a good time, connect over just voicing our concerns, our needs, everything our loved ones need. We are the leaders we need. And we're about to do that on this day. So
I think that's terrific. And you mentioned in there some of the tools or the resources that are necessary. Can you explain a little bit about what that means when registering to vote? Because there's often a common misconception about what documents you need versus you don't need, or what you need to produce when you actually go and vote. What documents or what information do people need to register and vote?
Okay, well, I think an ID is a very common thing. You either need a Nevada ID to register to vote in Nevada, or you need the last 4 digits of your social. So just make sure you have that information. You don't need to make sure you're at the DMV, because one element with registering to vote in Nevada is that Nevada is a very transient state. We have lots of people coming in and out and back to Vegas or back to Nevada, right? It's a very common thing here. And a big thing that the partners on this call have to deal with their communities and really meet them where they're at with that. So making sure that, folks know that they don't just need their Nevada ID to register to vote, that they can vote when they're out of prison. That is a very big thing that we face day in, day out. Every time I'm out there with our partners, almost every time I do visits with our partners, this is something I come across. Folks not believing that they're able to register to vote and that they have the right to vote just because they were in prison before. In our state, as long as you are out of prison, you have the right to vote, and we really need you to vote. I cannot express this enough. The expertise these folks have and where they could guide our community in the direction that we need to go is massive. And it's also a really big event that we're having at Parole and Probation. I have to shout out our guy, Jageda Chambers. FOA is also going to be there that day at Parole and Probation next Tuesday. So come through 12 to 4. We're going to be having a big old party with some barbecue there.
That sounds amazing. And Jageda, if you're watching, you are absolutely an MVP of coordinating all that work. And we're going to be talking about that more and more tonight. I do want to also flag one thing you mentioned, which is the vibes around voting, which is not always the same for all communities. And we're going to be touching on that tonight. I want to bring in our first guest to actually touch on that very exact thing. And that's Yesenia Castro, coming to us from the Las Vegas Indian Center. Yesenia, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to ask, what is the importance of National Voter Registration Day for tribal communities? Are there going to be events happening on the 20th next week that are going to be encouraging Indigenous Nevadans to be voting?
Hello, thank you for having me. First, I'd like to just address that I am not a tribal citizen, and so I'm not the most appropriate person to speak on this issue. But we do some work within tribal communities, and so there are going to be a few events happening. One is going to be at the Las Vegas Indian Center. We are having a talk about voting, and so we will be having free fry bread tacos for people who want to come out and celebrate the day with us, register to vote, create a plan to vote. We'll be having some bingo and Jeopardy with materials that share information about offices that are up for election and what their responsibilities are. And this is partially and to encourage people to register to vote and to get out there to vote. There's a lot of misinformation that floats around and more than just our community, but we want to make sure that people know that voting in local elections is so important and exactly how these things affect our daily lives. Yeah, so outside of that, there will be some more tribal events happening throughout the state of Nevada, not necessarily on National Voter Registration Day, but during the Voter Education Week of Action. So Pyramid Lake Tribe is having a Pyramid Lake Museum, Indian taco sale, but also registering people to vote. The tacos are free. Sorry. So if y'all are up north and want to visit Pyramid Lake at the museum, it's free. You have to get some free tacos again. But yeah, then another partner that's here in Nevada is NVAN, and they are at almost every single local powwow in the state. And so they are out there doing the work too, getting people registered to vote.
Well, you definitely had me sold on tacos and fry bread. So I'm going to be definitely looking to check those events out. I'd like to hear, and you clarified something, which is that you're not necessarily a representative of a particular tribe, but if you could maybe speak more generally, what are some of the challenges in the past that Indigenous folks in Nevada have faced when it comes to registering to vote or even getting out to vote? And how are these challenges being overcome by the folks that you mentioned who are doing work in the communities?
Yeah, so there have been quite a few barriers that we have noticed since the past couple of years. One of them is first, obviously, access to voting locations. Most of the tribes do have rural areas where the reservations are on. One of our closest ones is Moapa, and their closest location would be like a 25-minute drive for them, which isn't, to a lot of people, isn't a long time, but for people who don't have access to regularly get out of the reservation, that is a long time. Not only accounting for like long lines, issues with IDs. So a lot of people also who live on reservations may not have access to a Nevada ID, and so they would be using their tribal ID. Tribal IDs can be used in the state of Nevada as a form of identification, as long as it meets the requirements of having their full face, their birth date, their description, a physical description of themselves, an ID number, basically everything that your driver's license has. And not every single tribe has access to have that material on their IDs. With that, not every tribe has tribal IDs. So these have been like obstacles for some people in getting registered to vote, as you know, they don't know that they can use our tribal ID to register, not only with like one of the partners that we are, or at same day registration at a polling location. But again, access to polling sites is very low. There are a lot of community partners doing some work and getting access out there. I believe there is a tribe up north that is getting a polling site this year, so good for them. We're really excited to see how that pans out. And not only that, but making sure that we are amplifying like the resources that we have. So making sure people know that they are able to use their tribal ID to register to vote. And making sure that they know exactly all the information that is on there, as well as like, you know, the AB 431, people who are formerly incarcerated, Native people make up, they are overrepresented in the incarceration system. So making sure that they know that once they are out, they are good to register to vote, and making sure that they know exactly what policies might affect them, and making a lot of the election material more tangible and digestible for people.
That's excellent. And I think it all really seems to tie back into that theme of access, right? And making sure that voter registration is accessible to everyone. And I think a lot of folks take it for granted when they think, oh, well, I just go down to the DMV, fill out a form, or maybe just go on the website and just put in my driver's license and there we go. And I think you've identified a few different ways which Indigenous Nevadans are excluded from that process, either with disparity over accepting certain documents with tribal IDs, or even just not having a convenient place to go obtain those things. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe what you would prefer to see in terms of improving that access, building upon, like you mentioned, the law passed to allow for voting sites to be located on different tribal lands?
For me personally, I think instead of having to reach out to the Secretary of State to get these polling locations, this would be something that they should be working towards getting on their own. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on with the Secretary of State that isn't always like their first thought, I want to say, but definitely having more accessibility to reach these people who are in these seats, right? Having that information publicly accessible. A lot of the meetings are often online. A lot of people on the reservations may not have access to getting online. So making things more equitable across the board, I think definitely would improve the conditions of getting people registered to vote and actually have them out to vote, as well as like providing funding to get transportation out there, right? Like a bus or anything like that if they can't make the polling location site happen.
Oops, mute button invaded me there for a minute. What would you say when it comes to the organizing happening in Indigenous communities around Nevada is the motivation to vote, or to register to vote, rather? We know that often, just generally, midterm elections can often be low turnout, but is there more momentum towards voting this year that you're seeing? And is there more efforts to turn out the Native vote in Nevada happening at the moment?
I think so. In the 2020 election, we saw that the category of something else was one of the higher voting percentages that increased over the last 10 years. So I do believe that there is a lot of momentum happening and wanting to vote and registering to vote. I think a lot of the particular issues that are kind of getting people out there are the pressing issues of obviously climate change, water sovereignty, land sovereignty, body sovereignty, MMIR, which is murdered missing Indigenous relatives. These are all things that are affected by policy. And so I think definitely now that there is a lot more tangible, there's a lot more tangible information accessible, not only online, but people are actually getting these materials out to tribal members. I think it's really great. So that way they can see exactly what is happening everywhere. And this is, across the country, not just in Nevada, but how particularly prone Nevada is to, droughts, climate change. Now there is lithium mining happening here in Nevada. And so a lot of this is happening on tribal lands without tribal consultation. And so I think that a lot of tribal members are seeing this, and Indigenous members of the community in general, kind of like a wake-up call, seeing how we're raindrops in the storm. Coming together is the only way to really make that change happen.
Yeah, and you touch upon a really interesting point, which is that disconnect between the lack of consultation and things like lithium mining, but that sort of ironically spurring more action towards being civically engaged. Can you elaborate maybe more on that tension that some communities might feel between, I shouldn't even bother getting involved because they're never going to listen to us anyway, versus, like you said, that raindrops in a storm effect of saying, hey, we've got to be involved in this because it's the only way?
Yeah. So earlier I mentioned about making election material a lot more digestible. So there are so many, offices that are up for election, and it's really hard for a lot of people to sit there and navigate. What does this office do? What does that office do? So I think definitely when we're speaking about it on a very local Nevada level within communities, within respective communities, it's a lot easier to talk to them about how this affects them. When we did some redistricting efforts back in 2021, it was kind of disheartening to see people not really know how much, what positions in the city affect them, right? Like what offices kind of not allow, excuse me, what offices take care of things that affect them. And so I definitely think that that's something that needs to be more boosted, a lot more accessible. There are communities in Nevada who have a higher concentration of people who speak their tribal language. And so getting materials out to them in that language, if it's possible, would be really great too. A lot of the language is oral, so it's not always the easiest to translate and get out there. But I think it's really important to talk about that. And when we're talking about Indigenous people as a whole, right? A lot of the Indigenous community that I work with specifically comes from Mexico and our neighbors down south. I myself am Purépecha from central Mexico, and so when we talk about this, we got to talk about all of the issues that may face them. A lot of them, are immigrants. And so talking about these issues, getting things coming together as a community where we can kind of intersect everything that's going on is, I think, really important. And so how I mentioned talking about it on the local level, how it affects us is really important.
Definitely. And then we're getting some questions here from the chat. And I think there's a theme I'm noticing, and it kind of combines actually with my next question pretty well, which is how do folks outside of Indigenous communities within Nevada get involved in supporting this work and making sure that we're shining a spotlight on folks that are not traditionally included in that dynamic of the election and who's turning out and who's registering and that sort of thing?
I definitely believe amplifying all of the policy that is going on is really important, and seeing how that intersects with tribal and Indigenous issues. Like when we talk about Roe v. Wade, abortion for a lot of Indigenous communities has been something that existed for, time immemorial. And so getting that information to people about how it affects Indigenous communities, how there's a lack of autonomy in some of these situations, and both voting rights and access to voting, I think would be really great. And speaking to Indigenous people, I think is another really great way to talk about it, right? There's 27 tribes in Nevada. If you follow the Nevada Indian Commission, they always boost out things that are happening within these communities and how to help amplify these. I had the pleasure of going to a really small tribal land earlier this year. And so it was kind of very different for me. I had never come to a community that small. And so being there and speaking with them about the things that were going on in their community, I think is definitely really important. And we talk about Nevada, right? And Clark County has a third of the population, but a lot of these other little communities also do too. And so making sure that we're advocating for people who live in these rural areas where the population of voters is sometimes a lot more white, I think is a really great way to talk about it and be there for them.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I want to give you, I know you have to hop a little bit early, but I want to give you a chance. Can you plug what the Indian Center is doing, how to get involved with your organization, your work, and remind us again what the big events happening on the 28th and then throughout the next couple of weeks are for voter registration that you mentioned at the top?
Yes. So the work that we have been doing in the Indian Center, again, is making material really digestible for people. Some of our staff is bilingual, so we're able to do it in English and in Spanish. We are helping people understand voting rights as a whole. We are working with the Navajo Nation to get people registered for their tribal elections, and at the same time boosting to them everything that's happening in Nevada that may pertain to them in their respective county. We have our Talk About Voting event, which is happening on Tuesday. We'll have a lot of local organizations here and local Indigenous vendors who were kind enough to donate some stuff so that we can give away. So if y'all might want to win or come support local Indigenous businesses, in Las Vegas. It's a really great opportunity to come out and support. And as well as, I think a great resource is always following the Nevada Indian Commission. They got Twitter, they got Instagram, they're on Facebook. They are always boosting things that are happening in Nevada with powwows, in general. Also, Intertribal Council of Nevada is doing really great work to help boost this information in relation to events and how to support. We're also on Instagram, so y'all can follow us there. Really plain and simple, LVICNV. And we kind of post most of our material on there. But if y'all are ever looking to help get more involved with Indigenous affairs as a whole, I think definitely helping to boost information about what's going on, especially in relation to civic engagement and policy from either us or any of our partners who are able to boost that. I think I answered all your questions. I'm sorry if I didn't.
No, I think that was perfect. I wanted you to have that platform to plug. And I actually, that made me think of another question that I did have for you. And that was that these events, and I have to ask, this is kind of the prototypical white guy question, which is how do other members of the community participate at these events in a respectful manner that honors Indigenous heritage and isn't, acting in a manner of appropriation or colonialist attitudes?
Right. I definitely think that showing up and supporting with like boosting, always helps. When you are going to these events and you post about it, I think recognizing the land that you are on. We have 27 tribes, right? But we have the Washisho, the Paiutes, Northern Paiutes, Southern Paiutes, and Shoshone. And so I think it's really important that when you are doing these efforts that you are recognizing the land you're on and when you're supporting local Indigenous businesses, it's not appropriation, right? It's appreciation. You're buying for their crafts, you're paying for their time. And especially like a powwows, right? You go and buy some fried bread. This is somebody you're supporting. And this is somebody who is Indigenous. So I think that definitely just realizing like where you can support and always trying to support, I think is really great. There's always lots of businesses here in Las Vegas and in Nevada as a whole who are looking for support for whatever it may be. So I think, just kind of showing up more than just once. Also, like don't come to one powwow and be like, okay, I'm done. Come to them all. Show your support more than one time. I think is really important.
Right. It's not a box to check.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Ironically, voting is kind of a box to check in a literal sense, but when we're engaging in our community, we want true solidarity and not simply box checking. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Yesenia, for joining us this evening. I want to turn it to Miao Hong, the outreach manager with Asian Community Development Council, Miao, or ACDC for short. I want to bring you in on talking about National Voter Registration Day, the vibes, the thoughts, the feelings. And to start off, Nevada, of course, is one of the top 5 states with the largest percentage of AAPI residents and growing, in fact. How important is it that these new members of our community use their voice to vote?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It is incredibly important for the AAPI community to be using their voice to vote in every election. Since we have such a large AAPI population, we need to ensure that our diverse needs are met because the AAPI umbrella captures so many different ethnicities, histories, languages, and cultural differences. We've got over 200,000 eligible AAPI voters in Nevada, and those numbers can really impact an election. And I think most importantly, we want to ensure that our demographic isn't forgotten on public agendas because we contribute so much as one of the fastest growing communities in Nevada. We're adding to the workforce, we're small business owners, we use public transit and utilities, and our kids are attending public schools. And we've really got deeply diverse needs because the AAPI umbrella is huge. Asian Community Development Council does work to bridge these gaps, connect with our communities, give them resources they need, whether it be voter registration, citizenship assistance, or culturally familiar food security. But ultimately, we need AAPIs to vote and to voice their needs to gain support at all levels of government.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you raised too, which is that we kind of talked about this with Yesenia a minute ago, and that it's not just like there's one tribe and there's not just one group of AAPI Americans. It's all sorts of different cultures. Can you talk a little bit about that tapestry of different cultures and the approach that you all take in talking about voting and civic engagement within the context of all of that? Is it more so trying to find a common message that unites all, or are there efforts to really make sure that things, or are there different ways to talk about it for different communities?
Right, absolutely. So there are a couple ways that we like to go about this. So first of all, between Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, we've already got differences there in terms of our histories, how we come to the United States, what the reasons are behind that. And then under the Asian umbrella, we've got so many different countries that people are coming from, different languages. In China alone, there are so many different dialects beyond just Mandarin and Cantonese. So we're seeing a lot of different cultural differences. And so what we try to do is we have folks who are from those communities working with ACDC, either as staff or volunteers, so that it's a community to community bond. We aren't just serving for the sake of it. We are making sure that we are meeting people where they are. And so when it comes to messaging, we want to make sure that we can find messaging. We can try to have messaging for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We can try to do it separately. It's really going to depend on what our capacity is. But generally speaking, we try to accommodate the most common languages for AAPIs here in Nevada. So that's going to include Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Thai, and a couple other languages. And so we make sure that we are serving our community like as our community, and making sure that when we're recruiting people as volunteers and staff, that we're filling those gaps and that we're not leaving anybody behind.
Most definitely. And I want to focus on one particular group that we never want to leave behind, which of course is young folks. Trying to get them to turn out to the polls is always a little bit of a challenge. You at ACDC have set the bar rather high for yourselves because you are infamous or famous within our community for doing very fun as well as informational voter registration type events that involve baby goats, Pokemon Go, all sorts of other fun stuff. So the bar is set very high. So with that in mind, what are your events and plans for National Voter Registration Day coming up next week? And how can folks plug into that?
Yeah, absolutely. We love hosting fun events, especially when it comes to engaging the youth vote. We try to do anything that's going to be popular, anything that could go viral, anything that is going to engage the youth vote, since typically we see that that is where we are missing voters because of either voter apathy or just not really being engaged or educated around it. So for National Voter Registration Day, which we've been planning for a while, that's going to be September 20th, we are holding an event at Desert Breeze Park. We are going to be having food from Crunchies, which is a really popular Korean corn dog place from Shanghai Plaza. And I think they also have a location on Blue Diamond. From Fluff Ice, which is a sort of shaved ice cream type of deal. It's not exactly shaved ice, and it's not exactly ice cream. I think you would definitely have to come and get some Fluff Ice yourself to see what fluffy ice is. And we're also going to have drinks catered from Matcha Cafe Maiko, who is one of the local businesses here that we tend to get delicious matcha drinks from. That's going to start at 5 p.m. And at 7:00 p.m., we're going to watch the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once in the park. So highly recommend. First of all, it's a rated R movie. I don't really recommend to bring kids because it's rated R. But I highly recommend bringing
They
picnic
can't vote
blankets.
anyway. It's fine.
Yeah, they can't vote anyway. That was one of the reasons why we were okay with choosing a rated R movie. We were like, well, we don't really want kids anyway, since they can't register. So we are hoping that folks can bring picnic blankets, since it will be at the park and it's going to be on the grass. So, if you want to sit on the grass, that's fine. But also some picnic blankets and bringing your friends is going to be a great night to register everyone to vote. Have some great food, have some music by DJ Miss Joy, who is a local Asian American DJ here in Las Vegas. And there's also going to be a lot of different organizations, community organizations to, give out some free stuff, maybe show people like their pamphlets and also like recruit some volunteers. So if you're interested in finding other community organizations to work with, we're going to have about 10 people tabling during this event. So it's going to be really fun. And there will also be a petting zoo. Everyone always wants ACDC to bring a petting zoo. Yes. We will have baby goats and we will have a llama. And this will be, so we're going to have a llama. I know everyone's really excited for the one llama that we're bringing.
The llama's in high demand. I mean, you have fluffy ice and you have fluffy animals. So I think it's a perfect combination. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that too, because, I think what you're doing there is very sophisticated from an organizing perspective, right? It's pairing these things that are popular with the youths, with the young people, so to speak, and voting, which is something we typically think of as a little bit more stuffy and boring, and younger folks don't always understand the importance of it, or are reticent to get involved because it's not their thing. Can you talk about maybe that process just from a outreach standpoint of how you pair something like that with something fun and interesting to get people to recognize the importance of the more boring thing that actually is very, very important?
Right. All these components that go into our events are going to be ways for us to get conversation starters, right? So people want to come for the movie because it's a popular movie. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, I heard this is a great movie, but I haven't seen it. It's an award-winning film, and it's been actually really iconic for our generation because it is casted with mostly Asian American actors. It's produced by partially Asian American team, and it goes over themes of Asian American generational experiences. And so this is something that is completely culturally relevant to 21st century young Asian folks. And so getting people out just by that is one of the things that we like to do. And then when it comes to the food that we choose, we want to choose food that people get excited about. And since we are covering the cost of that food, then people can come for the free food, and people don't have to worry about like, oh, do I have to budget this week for this event? Like, no, you can just show up. And we have the opportunity then to ask people, hey, are you registered to vote? Did you update your information? And when we get people who are saying things like, oh, well, I'll do it later, or, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to vote. I don't know what's on my ballot. This is a great place for us to have that information conveniently for them. Because one of the biggest things about voting is that it's not really convenient sometimes. Like, dropping off your ballot at a place might not be convenient if you're working full time or if you've got 2 jobs, right? But with this, we can let them know, hey, you can skim your ballot if you scan this QR code, type in your address, and you can find out who's going to be on your ballot. You can find out what those offices are, because the research involved with it can take a long time if you're not familiar with it and if you're not like keeping up with elections every year. We can let them know, hey, like the elected officials that are going to be on the ballot, they control all these things that you might be affected by. So if they're a university student, they can definitely be affected by some of the legislation that comes out regarding universities here. If they are from an immigrant family, they're going to be affected by any legislation regarding citizenship, language access, especially with whether or not the ballot can even be in their family's language. So there's all sorts of reasons for why someone is going to be affected, especially at the local level, by the things that the people that we're voting for are going to do. And so this gives us plenty of opportunity to hang out, eat great food, have a good time, and then also get into those important conversations.
That's terrific. And I want to focus in on one thing you mentioned there, which is that language access piece, which is really, really important. And we talked about how there's so many different cultures, different dialects and things like that. We know that from the Voting Rights Act that different counties have to provide that material in different languages depending on a certain threshold of people within that county that are expected to speak that certain language. And I can only assume they figure that out using census data, which goes back to our previous campaign from years past to get out the census. But can you talk about what Nevada counties are doing in terms of this? Are there certain counties that meet particular requirements? And if so, what languages are offered? And are there instances where counties are not living up to maybe the role that they should be playing, or there's insufficient materials or gaps? And is ACDC working to help bridge that gap at all?
Right. So communities have to meet a threshold of 10,000 citizens or make up 5% of the voting age of one of the groups listed in a local jurisdiction, such as county, city, or municipality, and speak the same language and be limited in English proficiency. So those are the requirements for when a county is deciding if a certain language is meeting that threshold, and then they have to provide their election information in that language. In Clark County, we've reached the threshold for Spanish and Tagalog, but we have just missed the threshold for Chinese by less than 500 people. And the vast majority of API folks, an overwhelming amount, are going to be in Clark County. So this is super important. Asian Community Development Council and All Voting is Local have partnered to do work to ensure that Chinese ballots and election materials will be included for the 2024 and 2025 fiscal year, because we don't want to have to wait until 2026. We don't want more people to be left out, because we are already having this issue where the ballot isn't going to be accessible by our very large Chinese population. And one of the great things about Chinese ballots is that even if you speak Mandarin or Cantonese, the written language of Chinese is going to be the same. And so there might be differences with simplified and traditional, but generally speaking, this could be a ballot that is accessible to the entire Chinese population here in Nevada. And that makes up around like 30,000 people.
That's pretty staggering. And so from what it sounds like, was I correct when I assumed that the way that they gather this is through the census?
Yes, it is through the census. There are census questions regarding limited English proficiency. And so people would have to say that they have limited English proficiency on the census. And part of the difficulty with the census also is that if the census is not being collected in that language, then we might have difficulty having accurate numbers for that. So even if we've missed the threshold for less than 500 people, then we also need to account for what was the 500 people. Maybe they were missed because of how the census can be flawed in that way as well in terms of language access. So it's an ongoing problem, and language access is a huge thing for the API community, especially as we have so many folks who are first generation, who recently come to the United States, who are newly naturalized citizens. And so they have the capacity to vote because they became citizens. But if they're not given the information in their language, then they are entirely disenfranchised.
Yeah, it's wild to me that that's such a razor thin margin, and that really goes to show why the work of ACDC is so crucial, because you're right up against that threshold, and those folks are going to be left out if those materials aren't distributed to them in language. So thank you so much for doing that and showing that commitment. And hopefully next census will be administrated under a more responsible administration, and we can hopefully get that under that threshold so that those materials can be provided for folks in all languages who need it. I I wanted to sort of give you the floor again. Can you just plug how to get involved in ACDC's work and the voter registration events or events that you're doing next week for National Voter Registration Day? I know we already covered them, but if you could just run through that again of how people plug in and get involved.
Sure. So our website is acdcnv.org, and our Instagram page is going to be instagram.com/acdcnv. And if you follow our Instagram page, you can keep up with all of our events, and that includes our events that are going to be directly serving the community, such as our vaccine clinics, and all of our things that we do in Reno as well, since we do have a Reno office. So for all of you Northern Nevada folks, you can keep up with the work that we do in Washoe County. For National Voter Registration Day, that's going to be September 20th at 5 p.m. at Desert Breeze Park. We're going to be convening at the Kids Zone Parkway side of the park. There's going to be free food, music, that petting zoo, and we're going to watch everything everywhere all at once. There is a Facebook event for that, so I'm hoping someone is able to link that in the chat somewhere, or you can probably find it on Facebook. It's called Desert Breeze Movie Night. And then on September 30th, a week after National Voter Registration Day, you can come catch us at Boba Tea-licious on Blue Diamond. This is in Las Vegas in Southern Nevada for an event called Puppies and Boba. I highly recommend you bring your dog and grab some free boba. We're going to be registering people to vote. We're going to be doing some de-stress with dogs. So for those of you who are in the stressful organizing life, you can come bring your dog or come see our dogs and just hang out, and we'll definitely be registering people to vote there as well. And then for early vote day, we're going to be doing a K-pop themed event on October 28th. There are more details to come, so I highly recommend following our Instagram page, ACDCNV, because we are going to be giving out a lot of K-pop themed merchandise, and we are going to be encouraging people to vote early and take advantage of that early vote period.
That sounds so great. So many great events. The Puppies for De-Stressing, I think, is a great pitch to our fellow community organizing groups. I did have a question from the chat here. Is there anything that we can do to push for better language access at either I suppose it would be the county level, but to maybe either adjust that threshold or allow for some kind of margin of error situation? Is there anything that we could be pushing for on a policy standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. The Clark County Commission will have their town hall meetings anytime that there is opportunity for public comment. You can go ahead and tell them that we need language access for Chinese voters, that we have missed that threshold by less than 500 people, and that we need to really evaluate why we have that 10,000 limit, that 5% limit, and see if we can include anyone else that is just missing that threshold by a small margin. You can also volunteer with ACDC and keep in the loop with us for when it comes to legislative session, and also with All Voting is Local, who is helping expand voter access, especially through language access, through language barriers. So both ACDC and All Voting is Local is collaborating on this effort.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Meow. We're going to actually move now to Mr. Reverend Leonard Jackson, Executive Director of Faith Organizing Alliance, who is going to share his perspective on this topic. Welcome, Reverend Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I want to first start by asking about what is Faith Organizing Alliance's plans for national voter registration next week, and can you talk about the importance of having Voter Registration Day as a celebration of what makes our democracy so special?
Yes, first of all, thank you for having us, and thank you for the individual families and organizations that have joined us this evening, because that is one of the things that's really needed. No, we cannot stand alone, okay, to try to achieve our goals for our community. We have to come together as a group to help move our community forward. Okay, to answer your question, what are we doing for voter registration day? It's a celebration. It's a celebration because, again, we need to educate our community. We need more than just getting individuals to register to vote. We have to explain to our community why it's important for us to come together and vote, to speak out so we can make positive change in our community. That is how we're able to establish former felons, for example, people that come out of jail, how they are able now to register to vote. If we have not stood up and stood together to make a difference, this would not have happened. Okay, and to Jagata Chambers. Okay, since he started his program over the past couple of years, we've been working very closely together. Okay, to make this happen, to educate, again, former felons. On the 20th, he's having a program. We will work with him during this program. Okay, when his program is over, he will come join us to help support our program within the community. What are we doing? We're closing off a portion of our parking lot at Nucleus Plaza in front of our office. For that fact, free food, hot dogs, hamburgers, entertainment, live entertainment is coming out. We'll have the African drummers out there and the youngsters that do their dancing. We will also have the kids out there being painted and teaching them how they can more or less paint each other. Okay, we want this to be an exciting event to draw our community together. Okay, we will have members within our community sitting down to participate also, to do the voter registration drive for us. We will open the doors to answer questions within our community. We have special speakers that will be there. We want to create a sense of excitement to see answer the questions within our community. We don't want them to come and say, well, what does this? I do not want to vote because it does not affect me. We want our individuals within our communities to know why it's so important for them to register, to vote, to make a difference, make a change, because that is where changes are made, is at the polls.
Excellent. And I love that you're again talking about it in that celebration sense. And you touched on something that's pertinent to my next question, which is those formerly incarcerated individuals who can now register and vote. For folks at home who maybe don't know, a couple of years ago, the Nevada legislature put forward and passed and was signed by Governor Sisolak a bill that essentially said, if you have been formally incarcerated, you've completed your sentence, you are now able to register and vote, which at the time enfranchised something around in the ballpark of 77,000 Nevadans. And you touched on the work that Jagata does. We talked about that a little bit earlier at the top of the show. Can you talk about your efforts in organizing these formerly incarcerated folks, how the outreach to those folks looks? What does that look like? And what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the feedback and interest that formerly incarcerated folks have when it comes to voting?
Well, let me start here. One of the first press conferences that took place, believe it or not, took place at the First AME Church, where we held a press conference there. Individuals that were formerly incarcerated came, and once it was explained to them why it's important for them to vote, then they stood right there and filled out their packet so they knew that they had the right to vote, and this is what they were going to do. What do we do when I say at the First AME Church? Again, not just that one church, but again, the churches of Southern Nevada, for example, we sat down and we held a class there to explain to the pastors there how to take that information out to their congregations. Okay, we, Faith Organizing Alliance, what we do for the Parole Probation Office, We make it a point to be there for that fact, the minimum of 1 day a week. We try to be there 2 days out of the week. Some days with Jacquea, some days not, just with Faith Organizing Alliance, to have a conversation on the sidewalk if necessary. Provide water, food for these individuals as they're going into to register for the parole probation period. Okay, to make this happen, that's how we're able to educate our community, and this is an ongoing process. And just to show you, we also happen to be doing voter registration for an example at the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV. Okay, and you'd be surprised how many individuals come up and say, I cannot register to vote because I'm a former felon. Okay, that's what we have to educate them without mentioning which high school. Okay, I was at a high school, I guess it was about a week ago now, and there was a young man sitting there, and I would not have believed, because of the fact he was a senior in high school, well, why he would not register. He said, well, I'm a felon, he kind of whispered to me. I had to whisper back to him, that doesn't make a bit of difference, my man. Here's the form, fill it out. Okay? And you just saw the smile on his face. He could not believe it. Okay? So that's why it's so important for us to reach out and touch every base possible to educate, again, our community as far as the options that's available to them.
Yeah, that's such a touching story. And I think that really shows that for a lot of folks who have been formerly incarcerated, they kind of just assume like, oh, I guess I'm just essentially not, a second-class citizen now. I don't get to vote. And Nevada reversed that and said, no, actually, when you've completed your sentence, you can now re-enter society. And can you elaborate maybe on that aspect? Does this make it so that folks who have gotten out of prison, does allowing them to register and vote and participate in the process, do you feel that has an effect on making sure that they're able to be functioning members of society again?
By all means, it does. All right. It's kind of places the power into these individuals where they feel now that they're a part of, again, the community. Too often you have individuals that come out of the penal system and they feel as though I cannot find a job. That means I have a problem finding some place to live. My family is hurting. I'm uneducated. I mean, these are obstacles. Okay, once individuals, if you want to move forward, you have to understand what steps to take, what directions to go in. Okay, and the piggy double portion of this is when that bill was going through, Faith Organizing Alliance, we were one of the organizations that went up to Capitol for that fact. Some days, other days with just the state office building when the hearings were taking place, and we stood right there to support these issues. Okay, this way our community was able to see that we're not just in that community to do voter registration, etc. We are there to, again, empower our community. Just that simple.
Excellent. And then I want to shift gears a little bit, and it is kind of related because we, of course, know that the school to prison pipeline is a thing. And so we understand that that's a significant sociological aspect of this work as well. But Faith Organizing Alliance has also been doing outreach to high schools for voter registration as well. And can you talk about that experience and what's so important about engaging young folks at the high school level? Because not many people may know this, but you actually can pre-register as when you're 17 if you're going to be 18 on or before the election day. And so a number of groups through the Silver State Voices table are actually doing this work of going into high schools. Can you talk about that experience and what that's been like?
Yes. First of all, there's a portion of that, what you're asking, to educate, again, the school, whether it be the principal or teachers, etc. Okay? The importance and how simple it is for us to go in and educate the youngsters in class. Okay? And again, that is a total experience itself to educate the youngsters. And if you look at the past election, young people voting, okay, is definitely increasing. That's what makes the difference, again, within our society. That's a strong power block right there that will move our community forward in the right direction. It's an experience in itself to go in and have a conversation with students and explain to them, and this is what I do in the very beginning, when you're talking to the students, why it's important for them to register. Let them know that there are nations in this world that does not have the privilege, okay, of democracy within their society. And these doors are open, okay? There are countries in this world, like in South Africa, where people walk hundreds of miles just to exercise that right to vote. And that's why if you want positive change within our community, if you want your streets paved, we're talking about local elections, if you want your streets paved, if you want the education to move forward, if you want the right people on the school boards, if you want in the city council and chambers, then this was how you make positive change. You have to be the one to make a difference, have your voice heard, okay, and look deeply into society and see how you can make positive movements, positive change within your community. And I end up just telling them up front, if you do not go out and you do not exercise that privilege to vote, if things do not go the way that you want them to go, then you don't have a nickel in that quarter. So sit back and shut up. Okay. Other than that, if you want to make positive change, you take it to the polls, and that's where changes are made.
See, this is why we have you as the closer, because you're the one that it's like, if I could just sit, these 18-year-olds down and make them listen to Reverend Jackson and tell them, like, this is why you need to vote. And Reverend, my last question for you is, so we talked about that community bond and really having that stake in your community is really being important to voting. What is that really tapping into that motivating factor of how people get involved? And I want to circle back a little bit to what Angelina said at the start, right? Which was that sometimes the vibe, quote unquote, is around voting is not always super great. People get pessimistic, they get apathetic or cynical, especially when you're talking about younger folks dealing with, student debt and climate change and everything, or you're dealing with issues in the formerly incarcerated, folks who've literally quite in some cases have been chewed up by the system and spat back out. What is it in your estimation that is the motivating factor for reaching out to these communities to get them to turn out and vote? Or even just to register to vote, frankly. We're not even at GOTV yet. This is just voter registration.
When you look within our community and you challenge young people, students especially, just to look within their community, their household, we, people of color, we make up the largest percentage of those that are incarcerated, but we do not commit the majority of the crimes. So there's a problem. Our future depends upon, and that's their future also, depends upon us standing up, speaking up, and correcting the negativism within our communities. Okay? And that's the only way change is going to be made positively.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So we're going to go into listing out some of the events. But before we get to that, Angelina, I want to bring you back in really quick. Angelina, I wanted to ask you about, can you tell us and the folks on this call, what is the best way? And we're going to list out some different events here, but what is the best way for community members and so on to be involved in National Voter Registration Day and making sure that it's a successful holiday?
This is such a great question. I think I brought up, and it's been mentioned a few times throughout the call or this meeting, that like the vibes are a little off, huh? Right? I think people have become so tense with this stuff, so uncomfortable even having the conversations, that we're not having the conversations anymore. Talk to your friends, talk to your loved ones, talk to your community members. Make sure they know that they have a right to vote. Make sure that they're getting out to vote. Make sure that like they know that we have lots of reasons to be voting. We have municipal elections for the first time in the same time as federal elections this year. That means our mayor is going to be voted on the same time as senator positions and state legislative positions. Making sure that if you have family members, loved ones that were formerly incarcerated, that they know that they can register to vote. This is such a massive issue. The fact that these folks don't even know that they can vote because they're so traumatized from their experience in prison that they do not want to get back there, because in the past, you would actually be sent back to prison if you registered to vote. If you took part in choosing the direction for our communities. That is how severe this issue that we're facing is, and how important it is that we empower folks. We really need to take part in each other's lives and empower each other to register to vote, and acknowledge that this doesn't have to be as tense as we're making it out to be. Let's go register to vote and let's go vote. Let's all participate, because at the end of the day, I trust everybody on this call, and I trust my loved ones and my friends and the people I grew up with to help make decisions for our community. I grew up here, and a lot of us have been here for a really long time. Let's all take part, and let's all make sure each other is taking part. And let's just make this a part of our fabric again. I think that is a really key element. So talk to people, bring them to these events, do some online voter registration, let people know that they can do this. All right. Some more things. Follow us on social media. I have to shout us out. On Facebook, we're Silver State Voices. On Instagram, we're ssv.nv. Twitter, ssv._NV. We're also on TikTok now, and we're doing really good, I got to tell you. So a goal I really want to make for everybody who's listening: help 5 people register to vote, or help 5 people update their information. That could be address, a last name, a party. There's so many things that you might want to put on your voter registration file. Please, please, please update your information. Get folks registered to vote. Let's make this part of our fabric again. So thank you all so much. And I'm so excited to celebrate this day. I'm going to be all over the place, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Hell yeah, we are. It's going to be great. Thank you so much. So we're going to now run through. These are some of the events, some of which have already been covered tonight. Some of these have not yet. So keep an eye on the chat as we move through these links. But I want to make sure that all the exciting events for National Voter Registration Day happening this coming Tuesday, September 20th, are shared with all of y'all. So to start with, we have events. The first event from Chispa, Nevada. They are having an event called Drink Your Values Night, which we all enjoy doing. That's going to be Tuesday, September 20th, again from 6 to 8. And that's going to be at the Cerveza Bottle Shop and Tap Room down on 1301 South Commerce Street, number 130. That is in the Arts District. So that'll be very exciting. The link for that will be in the chat. The second one is going to be Faith Organizing Alliance's event that we just spoke about. That one's going to be from 3 to 7, if I'm not mistaken. And that's going to be at the address. Reverend, can you give us that again?
Sorry. Yes, it'll take place at 940 West Owens, and that is Nucleus Plaza. Come on down. And after you celebrate and have a good time, I'll tell you, make it a mantra is take your soul to the pole.
That's right. I did have an idea. This is terrible, but when I was at the Galleria Mall for voter protection, the voting site is actually set up in front of a Kohl's department store, and I thought we should do an event called Souls to the Kohl's.
No polls, no.
But that's just how my brain works. So please don't listen to me. So the next event I want to highlight, this was the one that Yesenia talked about, the Taco Bout voting. This event is with the Las Vegas Indian Center membership drive, voter registration and Indian tacos. That's happening September 20th, 2022 from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. at 2300 West Bonanza Road, also in Las Vegas. Next up, we have the Rights Restoration Sidewalk Party. That's going to be happening also in Vegas at 215 East Bonanza Road. And it will be it will be, I think, also from 12 to 4 p.m. Next, and this is going to be rough, y'all, but I'm going to give it a shot. Un verano de votación y comunidad. That was terrible. That event is with Make the Road, Nevada. That's at 4250 East Bonanza Road, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89110. That's going to be from 6 till 8 p.m. Also happening in Las Vegas. Then we go to the ACDC, that's the Asian Community Development Council movie night, happening at 8275 West Spring Mountain Road, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89147. And that'll be from 5 to 9. That's the movie night, so make sure to check that one out. I hear there might be llamas there as well. And then we have the Faith Organizing Alliance Party, 940 West Owens Avenue, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89106. And again, that one is going to be 3 to 7. So those are just some of the events that are happening. Like I said, on Tuesday, September 20th, National Voter Registration Day, a brilliant holiday where all of us could celebrate what makes our democracy great, which is getting out and making your voices heard and maybe petting a fluffy animal or eating some great food while you do it. So I want to thank our terrific guests for joining us this evening. The links to all these events and more will be down in the chat, so make sure that you check those out and RSVP, because we're going to be making sure to amplify all of these as people are registering and getting out to vote this election cycle. And then finally, I just want to plug again that we have our own voter registration link at registernevada.org, where people can go online to register. It's very simple and easy and quick, and you'll be able to do it right from your bedroom. And in addition to that, we just launched, once again, our Vote Smart NV Nonpartisan Voter Guide. You can find that at votesmartnv.org. And that guide will give you all of the candidates running for office in their own words, responding to questions from our survey. It's completely nonpartisan, makes no endorsements, but the cool part is you can use it while you fill out your mail ballot, so that you have all the candidates right side by side. Makes it very easy. You could do it as a family. You could do it locked in a closet by yourself. Whatever your fancy is, you can do it. So make sure to check out those resources as well. And with that, we will close it out for the evening. I think the tip-off at the Las Vegas Aces finals game should have perhaps just happened. So I'll let all of you get to that. And thanks very much, and we'll see you next week on Out in Front, where we'll have a very special episode all about Nevada Public Lands Day. It's going to be very exciting. We have a week full of events happening that you can check out at nevadapubliclandsday.com. and find information and RSVP for the exciting events that are happening leading up to the celebration on the 24th of September. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night and stay safe out there.